thank you, sir, for this opportunity. But I find that I'm already being pushed into saying no, but uh, anyway. But my worry is a little bigger actually. That while the audience contains a lot of people I look up to, it doesn't really contain the people whom we need to be speaking to. So not enough uniforms in the audience, and that's really a problem because otherwise a lot of the you'll see from here a lot of the ideas people know what needs to be done, but it's kind of getting stuck in a supercavitating echo chamber. So nevertheless, let me do my bit about pushing forward some thoughts. The first thing is that I'm speaking not in my usual role of carrying the standard of carrier aviation, uh, but in a new field, and therefore I've had to approach this. I've had to teach myself this field, uh, learning from first principles, trying to follow the motto of AST, precision with excellence. So trying to achieve precision, and here you realize the first problem. There is no definition of Atmanirbharta. Everyone pretty much has his own definition. There's frankly a huge word soup out there, wherein innovation, indigenization, giving fillip to youngsters, college students, self-reliance, strategic autonomy. There are all kinds of words out there which all pass off and pretend to be Atmanirbharta. Unless there are clinical definitions, I am afraid you're going to get a big mishmash wherein the typical government of India project has something come something. It pretty much implies you can't make up your mind about what you really want, rather than saying multi-role everything. The second part is that most of what is written out there is prescriptive. It's telling you about what they want you to do for Atmanirbharta. It's not defining to you why, what is the foundation for it, what is the imperative for it, and basically I'm referring back to the fact that we don't have a strategy document. Now you might say, why is a private player talking about strategy? But if you look at some of the examples of other countries, developed countries, for example, as part of our outreach, I ended up studying the Japanese structure, and starting from their strategy, which lists a very clear requirement to move away from dependency on the US, tracing all the way through down to specific weapon systems and what is the imperative that they are, what is the real change that they want to bring about. It's very, very clearly traceable. Now that is really what money needs in order to find its avenue for a point of application. Unless there is a basis, and this is where when we end up talking to investors and having to the investors bully us because we are small players. You have to really answer their questions searchingly. You can't answer the question just with bluster. And that is where it would really, really help that there is a clearly chalkable, traceable route from what the country really wants to do, what does it really mean by, when it says certain things, and therefore why are you proposing a product of a particular category or investment in a particular category. Now, coming back to the core topic that I was supposed to be speaking about, there are frankly three basic points of contact between a private player and the customer. The first one is, of course, requirements. The second one is the stick, which is certification, and the third part is the carrot, which is the financial models as such. As far as requirements go, now, taking that same thought of precision, words matter, precision matters. Even as a core document as the DAP starts off with saying that the requirements of the services are not negotiable. That basically goes against the first principles of design, which is that every design finally is a compromise. It is an optimization of the right parameters, which basically means to say that you cannot say that anything is not negotiable. Every element of it, the Rafale does not fold its wings. Is that a negotiable element or a not negotiable element? As far as, whereas for TED-BF, it is a mandated requirement that you will stick to a certain particular dimension. So the first thing about this not negotiable, I think we really need to be very, very careful about our choice of words. You go down the thing a little bit further and you realize that as important a aspect of turning an idea or a concept into a product and going through all the various stages, there is this huge discipline of requirements engineering, which is a kind of the first half of the V of systems engineering. Now, systems engineering itself is a cultural weakness in India. We don't teach systems engineering. You cannot hire a good systems engineer for love or for money. There are very, very few, and they are by name, literally. You can't get them by just putting out a job description on LinkedIn. A subset of that is requirements engineering, and that is kind of dismissed in one paragraph about it will kind of somehow be translated into requirements. Now, who has done the engineering to translate these original concepts into specific parameters? And you'll find an outcry across, globally across the world now. A lot of people militating against this, that why do you even need to put out requirements? Just give us your problem statements. The real reason I suspect that you can't put out a problem statement is that you could end up with, on the one hand, a drone which can carry cargo. On the other hand, you could end up with a cable laying device for a cable car. For the same problem statement, and the person on the desk would not have a way of objectively evaluating one against the other. Now that is a process problem. That's not really what should prevent you from doing what you need to do in order to get the best value for your money and get solutions to your real problems. End result is, when you ask about innovation, you really have to ask the question, who is innovating? Is it the guy who's writing the requirements? I think even small changes, like if the 3-star imposes that the requirements shall not exceed 1 page, and probably shall be, you get more credit for the shorter the requirement that you write. I think it will completely change the face of the way we write our requirements. Let's not forget, some of the aircraft that we still drool over, they came out of requirement sets which barely even reach a page. And I'm talking about, let's say, the F-16, which is kind of got a 4-point requirement. Having said that, you'll realize that in the specifics of what we write also, you'll find that very short shrift given to even what is prescribed in the DAB. And for example, there is this thing called PSQR. Unfortunately, there isn't a format for PSQR, especially the P part of the PSQR, and therefore the PSQRs that frankly come out are embarrassingly detailed. There is a PSQR for a multi-role fighter which has in great detail dimensions of the pilot baggage in it, that too in inches. Completely defeats me. How can that find a place in a PSQR which is supposed to be validated in PSQR trials, and you make or break decisions on that project on the basis of whether you pass or fail? So the absolute essentials of a PSQR, which is what are the absolute essential elements which decide on whether that project is worth continuing or not. Grading everything else as desirable, if at all you choose to put anything into it. There is no need to put it at the PSQR stage. There is supposed to be a PSQR trials. There is supposed to be a whole stage of translation of PSQR into SQR, but it doesn't happen. We tend to treat single stage composite trials as some kind of a favor done to the OEMs. And finally, leading up to defining what is the method of demonstration of that particular requirement. That's what a PSQR is supposed to be all about. Unfortunately, even in the big ticket programs, I have not seen a PSQR drafted in that correct spirit, drafted in the form of the lightweight fighter competition, which resulted in the F-16, and therefore you are not going to get an F-16 until and unless you're going to get designed by committee. Is pretty much what you're going to get. Next part is the stick, certification. Now, certification is the book that we use, the religion of the book. The book that we use are DEFSTAN, MIL standards, etc. But we use them completely out of context. The preamble of all of these documents, why they have been written, in what format, in what form they are supposed to be used, who is supposed to use them, who is supposed to implement them. We do not follow any one of those elements of the MIL standards. So, for example, the MIL standards, including choosing which standards to apply, are the responsibility of the project management authority, who is supposed to balance between the cost of implementing a particular certification requirement, the method of checking it out, and also what particular variant of that standard, what subparagraph to apply. They don't even have a certification agency to start with, for example, the US DOT. Now, here we apply it like a book to be applied by a person who does not have any stake in the success of the program. He only has a stake in making sure that there is no blame that comes on to the certification process. And therefore, it results in, for example, real aberrations like the draft military airworthiness bill, which frankly is the most regressive, retrograde piece of legislation that is going around. The only saving grace is that frankly large parts of it are unimplementable. But nevertheless, it conveys an extremely negative message to private players, and frankly, I don't know who it is really aimed at. So the military airworthiness bill is really regressive. I urge you all to read the draft and try and see how it would apply. The next part, which is mixed up in certification somehow, is this business of indigenous content, and here is where I respectfully would like to disagree with Mr. Rajiv that indigenous content is to be applied in the right form as an overall metric of the health of the system. It is not a constraint to be applied on an individual player, particularly players who are seeking to do innovative work. Now, here is where you might see a bit of a different perspective on the basis of innovative, disruptive new weapon systems versus established, players of the legacy weapon systems. In the sense that what we are really seeking to do is to put together, existing technologies in creative, wicked new combinations to solve problems in a disruptive manner. And therefore, for us to be carrying the can of creating the indigenous industry for the components is frankly unnecessary and frankly retrograde, because you're going to slow us down. We can go down that whole path about discussing how counting that indigenous content is one big black hole by itself, and in fact sometimes the indigenous content ends up that in combination with the L1 actually ends up pricing out or dialing down the value of the IP that we ascribe to the IP that has been actually created in-house, because it's software, it's humanware, that gets dialed down to zero because we get pushed down to the bill of material cost, and which is unfortunately important. So passing the buck on to the OEMs for a failure of the whole nation to create this kind of industrial base is frankly unfair, like I said, unnecessary, and frankly retrograde. So mixing up, why am I talking of indigenous content in certification? Because somehow the conversation has become about certification of indigenous content also. And lastly, I'll talk about the financial model. Now, everybody says that you'll only get what you pay for and probably a little bit less. If you only pay for products, you're not going to get R&D. So there's no point talking about the percentages of investment in R&D if the only form by which the customer is going to purchase is he's going to pay for complete products. And therefore, even when you are talking about some completely new ways of, we're talking about a swarm. Nobody has actually used a swarm properly. But if you just do a word count on the requirements, you will find that, for example, the strength of the walls of the GCS cabin to be certified by kick panel test, that has more words dedicated to it than swarming. Swarming is written off, and there shall be flocking, foraging, and swarming attacks. That's it. Now that is clearly an absurdity. It clearly it's not just, I won't call it an aberration. It is absurd. It frankly makes it such that you wonder what are people paying for. And unfortunately, every one of these things is a pass-fail tick. So if I can kick my boot through the panel of that GCS, and the point being that in disruptive warfare, we are trying to make sure that the command posts in themselves are disaggregated, whereas the requirements are forcing us to aggregate not just the command post, but also the maintenance infrastructure, also the deployment infrastructure, and the transportation all into one vehicle. So it actually runs against the core concept that we are trying to put across, which is disaggregating of everything. They, in fact, sometimes are working towards in the almost opposite direction. So again and again, this is something which I've heard even very senior officers say, how do you expect us to be interested in R&D? We are only responsible for war fighting. To which my response normally is, does it mean we are only responsible for war fighting? Conditions apply. That is, if you can guarantee supply of all the weapons, if you can guarantee uninterrupted supply chain, if you can guarantee scale up in of production to larger numbers, etc. The next point in this financial thing is that everybody agrees that we grow up as, and we classified as adults when we learn the art of delayed gratification. Now, as far as the defense industry is concerned, delayed gratification is repeat orders. Repeat orders don't fructify. Repeat orders force you to go through exactly the same process, and basically, if it's, especially when it comes to the innovative, disruptive, the disruptors, your disruptive idea is already out in the open. Now that can easily be replicated by anybody. So if you have been extra strict in the acceptance of that initial small run that you contracted for, it only is worth my while to put in those quality improvements to make sure that it is, and frankly suffer a loss on that initial order if there is a clear path to repeat orders. If there are no repeat orders, there is going to be no sense of delayed gratification, and therefore there is going to be no investment in quality. There is frankly going to be a whole spate of white labeling and basically importing in some form. So you'll also find that a lot of times one part of the system works against the other half of the system. So for example, if there is an incentive in the DAP for innovative thing by, if you classify it as higher risk, you get an incentive on the L1 price that you have bid. But because you have linked the requirement itself to the need of a specific end customer, and that end customer in the initial stages itself, we have to justify that it is low risk in order to get his buy-in. So it's kind of like a catch-22, and there's no win at the end of it. You can't really exploit that business, that incentive at the end, because you yourself have taken great pains to show that it is a low risk, low technical risk venture in the first place. So putting all of this together, you'll realize that a lot of it is not about addressing the detail of it. I think we need to pull up our socks and address what are the fundamental Indian cultural weaknesses which have forced us into this into this particular thing. We use this word a lot, a whole of nation approach, whole of government approach. I suspect none of us really has an idea about how deep and how wide is the span of this whole of government approach. The previous panel discussion on on engines, I would really recommend. There's a fantastic book, The Secret Horsepower Race. The engine developments in the Second World War. To understand what it takes to make an engine, of course, that's talking about piston engines, but the depth of right from which colonies to retain in order to get access to which grades of raw crude, to all the strategic materials for bearings, to all the papers and the format of technical exchange of ideas. That book is breathtaking in its detail of research, and I think it should be made mandatory reading for anybody who wants to address India's engine problems or frankly even things like disruptive and innovative technologies. Thank you.